Well, good afternoon and welcome. It is great to see all of you here. We also have about 200 people online today as well, so welcome, welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Erickson. I am the Interim VP for Strategic Planning and Initiatives. I've been in this role only 5 months. I've been back at Lehigh almost 2 years in 3 different roles. But I have a deep Lehigh history. I actually came here initially in 1983. Served in 6 different positions until 2005, left as Vice President for Administrative and Government Affairs, was a college president in Ohio at Wittenberg University for 7 years, the president of Northampton Community College down the road for a decade, retired, failed retirement, and I'm here, and I'm loving what I'm doing. So I look forward to this conversation with you today. Just to give you a sense of what we're going to do, we're going to start off with some words from our president. Nathan and I are then going to walk you through just kind of where are we with the strategic plan. We've been going out talking with lots of groups, so if this sounds familiar, my apologies on that, but we want to make sure you're up to speed on what we're talking about. We're then going to hear from 2 of our initiative leads. We're going to hear from Nancy Trainer, our Associate Vice President for Facilities and Campus Planning, about transforming the Mountaintop. She's the lead for that particular initiative. And then we're going to have Sabrina Jedlecka, Deputy Provost for Graduate Education and Enhancing Graduate and Lifelong, who's also heads up the Graduate and Lifelong Learning Initiative. And she's going to talk about PhD reform. And then at the end, we're going to have Q&A. So you'll have a chance to actually ask any questions you might have. We welcome those questions. So without any further ado, I will ask our president to come forward, President Joe Helble, class of '82, Lehigh's 15th president. Joe, you're on.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here, both online and in person. Those of you who are here in person, I trust many of you chose to walk or run up the mountain today. I won't ask for a show of hands, but thank you. I want to comment on something Mark said just a minute ago, that this may be familiar to many of you. I actually hope it is familiar to many of you. When we went through the planning process, the strategic planning process, starting it 2.5, approaching 3 years ago, one of the things that we promised, one of the things I promised when asking for your engagement in this exercise was that this would not result in a document that sat on a shelf and gathered dust, that this would be a blueprint, a template for action moving forward. And one of the reasons we ask for your time and continue to convene in gatherings like this and in meetings large and small around campus is to carry that conversation forward, to carry the work forward, to get your input, ideas, reaction, and to speak with you, not to you, about the work of this university and the direction we're heading. When we went through the planning process and developed the plan, which, as you will hear today, we are now beginning to refer to not as our strategic plan, but as our strategy, another indication that this is the direction we are moving. We set several high-level goals for us as a university community: to be a national leader in student outcomes, to expand our research portfolio, but do so in very focused ways, to be even more interdisciplinary in our educational offerings, including at the PhD level, to grow graduate enrollments, and to engage both broadly and deeply with the local community, and to find ways to do our work differently when it makes sense, to revise systems and processes, to be more data-driven and enable each of us over time to be able to do our jobs, to contribute to this university in ways that are more fulfilling and even more impactful. There's a lot happening. You've heard that in the campus gatherings. You will hear that today. And it comes at what is a very positive moment for this university. I won't recite the long list of positives that I often cite when I'm traveling around meeting with alumni, but I trust you know, whether we're speaking about admissions, whether we're speaking about research funding, whether we're speaking about external recognition, whether we're speaking about fundraising, the past 12 to 18 months have been extraordinarily positive for this university. And I will say one of the things that I've found deeply satisfying is, even anecdotally, as I've walked around campus and attended events the past few months, I have had members of our faculty from across the campus spontaneously come over to me, including one memorable example in a rainstorm. If you remember when it used to rain, that tells you when it happened. It was in late September. But to speak about the quality of the students and what we're seeing each year being somehow even better, even more engaged, even more thoughtful than the last. So the signs are very positive. But there is a lot of work to do. This is a lot of work that we're asking of each and every one of us. And as I've traveled around the campus this past year, I've been meeting with individual departmental faculties in each of our academic departments to hear questions about our strategy, to speak about each department's academic connection to the plan. A question that does come up from time to time is, how will we do this? How do we do this in addition to doing all the things we need to do to make the university run and to teach and engage our students on a daily basis? There is no magic answer that I'm about to convey from the podium other than to say, I hear this, we know this. And if the strategic plan only succeeds by everyone doing more, it will not be possible for us to succeed. And so we are asking for input. We are looking for ways to do this in the context of the work that we do on a daily basis to engage our students, engage the community. This is important because this is a moment of change for higher education. This is important because higher education is challenged financially and in other ways. This is important because we are committed to Lehigh being an institution that will not only survive but thrive and be extraordinarily well positioned for the future. So I'm going to turn it back to Mark, Nathan, and the others who will speak to us about specifics. But I want to say again, thank you for showing up, for turning out, for engaging, for being open to the direction that we collectively, all of us, through this strategy, are seeking to move this university to take a great university and make it even better positioned for the students of the future. So thank you, and Mark, back to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Am I on? Okay, good. Thank you very much, Joe. Those are great words. So let us jump into talking a little bit about where we are. Now, since I'm in month 5 of this role, I thought I would just provide you with some early impressions. So I'll do that in a minute. We're also going to talk a little bit about everything that's happened since last July. We're going to share what the themes for this year are as we talk about the strategy, some successes and accomplishments that happened in year 1. And then talk about year 2, the year we're in, and what kind of campus engagement is happening and is planned for the rest of the year, and also what our roadmap for the year ahead looks like. So let me, as the guy who's been in this seat for only 5 months, tell you some of my early impressions. I think the first thing that I would say is the strategy has great momentum and great infrastructure. And kudos go to my colleague, Chris Cook, for the great work that I think has happened here in the year leading up to this. The other thing that I see is strong support among the senior leadership of the university. Key, incredibly important to make sure we get to where we need to be. We have 10 initiatives, and we have a 10-year time frame. I think it's important to recognize that's a lot to be tracking, and it's a pretty long time frame. So clarity, agility, and focus is going to be key as we move forward to make sure we're tracking what we're doing. But we also understand 10 years is a long time. The world will change next year. It changed last week. It will change next week. And we as an institution need to change and evolve, and our strategy will shift over that time period as well. The next thing I would say, with 46 years of experience in higher ed, is that many strategic plans start out very bold, very inspiring. Everybody gets excited about what's going on, and then you hit what I'll describe as, Dom shared this term with me, the sludge. The resistance to change, the bureaucracy, the budgetary issues, all those things that prevent us from reaching here as opposed to here. I would say we need to work through that. We need to make sure this is a bold plan. This is a bold place at an important moment. So us moving forward with great energy and vision is incredibly important. And last but not least, as we go into year 2, it's going to be important we celebrate milestones with the plan and individuals that are moving the plan forward. So be looking for that. You'll see examples of that as we move into the coming weeks, moving ahead. Just a quick overview. I hope this is not a new slide to anyone in this group. But we have our 6 key initiatives, and then we have our foundational initiatives. All of them are important for us to get to where we're going. One change was made. There was a change from lifelong Lehigh to enhancing graduate and lifelong learning, because it more clearly explains our focus around graduate education and the growth we want to be making there. So activities since July, a couple things have happened. One of the things we've done is we've clustered the 10 initiatives into 4 different areas. And we, Nathan and I, engage in conversation with the initiative leads in these sorts of groupings: education, research, infrastructure, and community, and have actually found that the interplay among those initiative leads in those meetings is very helpful to create the kind of conversations we're looking for. We also want to make sure we keep you up to date with what has happened in the past and where we're going in the future. Hopefully you all read your campus memo that came out the end of September, which really encapsulated what happened in year 1, what were the lessons that we learned, and then what are we planning to do in year 2. If you haven't looked for that, please take the time and go to our website and find it. And then we have 2 new mantras for the year ahead. We're going to share those in 1 second. As you heard the president say, we're trying not to say strategic plan anymore. We're saying strategy. It's all about action at this point. You know, we know what our plan is. Now it's all about putting that plan into place. And like I said before, focusing on milestones and celebrations. So these are our themes, really 2 for our second year of implementing the plan. As you know, last year you could see signs everywhere on campus. They're still here. Lots of hoopla, lots of excitement in year 1 of the plan. We worry that some of that excitement and energy can dissipate as you go into year 2. So we've got to avoid a sophomore slump. Part of the way of doing that is to make sure that everybody who is part of this community, part of Lehigh, sees the plan as their plan. This is not Joe's plan. This is not Nathan's plan. This is not my plan. This is our plan. It is your plan. Everyone at this university can shape the future of this university through this strategy moving forward. So here are some of our successes in year 1. You want to pick up here?
Sure. There have been quite a number of successes in year 1, things that we had planned for, things that we had intended to try and achieve, and some things that I think were not part of the plan at the beginning of the year, but where we were opportunistic and we were able to achieve some things. Of all of those successes, and we have long lists on the various web pages, I'm just going to talk about a few here. So first of all, we created the first of the new university research centers, specifically a Center for Catastrophe Modeling. That has gotten off to a great start. The group has come together, is working very closely together. We've done some things we've been successful in raising some money from a philanthropic perspective. We've done some things in terms of raising the visibility of that work here at Lehigh. A couple weeks ago, there was a meeting here on campus here at at Ben Franklin of about 50 companies and other organizations who are interested in catastrophe modeling, who are here as part of the kickoff or a stakeholders meeting for a new industry university cooperative research center that will be, we hope will be funded by NSF. But each of those companies was willing to say, yeah, this is something that we want to do. We want want to be there for this kickoff meeting, and we are interested in contributing financially to this effort because it is something that is meaningful and important to us. We have created last year the new Inter-College Program in Business and Health. We're in the process of recruiting students for that program right now. We had, I think the number was 15 ED students who said, yes, that's the program that we want to be a part of. And so we're in the process of building the pool of applicants for that program to arrive next fall. We've made some significant investments in student success, and these are investments in a number of different places. Support for the Center for Academic Success in Student Affairs. The math department has been doing some really great work to try and enhance student learning in math courses. We are looking at that as a place where we have set some concrete and specific targets for student success in terms of first-year retention, graduation rate, placement rate. And we're making investments there. UCPA last year did a community perception survey, really to provide baseline information as to how is it that we as a university are seen by our neighbors in Bethlehem, in the Lehigh Valley, in the region. That information that survey provided us with information about how we are seen, how we are perceived, how much do people know about the work that we are doing. Will be followed up in subsequent years so that we can track and see how it is that is materially changed. We have initiated a new comprehensive campus planning effort, which will really define at a high level what will campus look like, the physical campus. What will it look like in 30 years? And what plans do we need to start making today in order to prepare us for that 30-year time horizon? Where should we have additional housing? Where should areas of research be focused, et cetera? So that's ongoing. You'll hear more about that probably in February. There was work last spring with BBB, this outside firm that we've brought in, but there's an update that will be provided in February. We've initiated an assessment really of our brand strategy. That is, again, work with an outside firm called Ology. That work is ongoing and will inform how it is that we talk about Lehigh as a university, how it is that we talk about what we are doing and seeking to do. That's, I think, going to be critical for us as we go forward, for all of us to be kind of on message and have a similar way of describing the efforts that are happening across the university. And we put in place the Lehigh Commitment, the financial aid, the decision around financial aid, such that every student coming from a family, every undergraduate student coming from a family with a family income of under $75,000 a year will pay $0 a year in tuition. We had, I can't quote the number, and I don't see Dan Warner in the audience. We had hundreds of students, I think something like 340 students or something like that, take advantage of that opportunity last year, which has had a material impact on the economic diversity of our incoming class. Yeah, do you want me to take this one? Or?
It doesn't matter.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing we're doing, and I think it's important, is we're tracking our progress. So if you go to our website, you will find a dashboard that talks about the progress that we're making across the different initiative areas. So I'm going to take you, just with any luck, I'm going to take you, yeah, there you are, to the website. And then if you want, you're welcome to talk about these as I pull them up if you want. I'm going to start with Make a Difference.
So, I mean, overall, this dashboard is, first of all, it's a work in progress. There will be things added to it and refinements made. But it is our way of publicly stating both where we are today, where we've been over the last few years, and where we want to be. So take one of these measures, four-year graduation rate. Last year, four-year graduation rate was 79%. You can see that we have a goal of 85%. All of these are 10-year goals. We've been sort of bouncing around the 80-ish, slightly below 80% level. But we are on the record as saying that we want our four-year graduation rate to get to 85%. Similarly, we have numbers for six-year graduation rate, career outcomes. One of these that we're focused particularly on today, or this year, is first-year retention. That number has been, I think it's actually on a different tab, but that number has historically been sort of in the 90s, we're looking over 10 years to get to 97% first-year retention. That's 97% of the students who start with us one fall come back to us the subsequent fall. That number this year was 93.7%. Let's call it 94. Next year, the goal is 95%, to get us on a trajectory to get to 97% within 10 years. We're trying to do this, and that's a particular example, but we're trying to do this to be very transparent and very upfront, and to enforce a kind of accountability on the work that we're doing.
Yeah, so just to give you a sense of what some of the other tabs look like, Make a Difference, Make It New, Make It Together. Here's a little bit of Make It Together, which speaks about sense of belonging on campus. It talks about our retention rates as well. These are all important factors that we're looking at and tracking as we continue to move forward. And then also Make It New. We talk in here about our goals around sponsored research, what those numbers look like, what we want those numbers to look like, and the trajectory that we're looking to have. Anything you'd add there? Okay. So continuing to move along. So, I mean, part of this is creating opportunities for all of you to engage with the plan. We talked about no bystanders. So there are a few things we're doing this year. We got some feedback that the town halls alone were not enough opportunity for engagement. We're still doing the town halls. Obviously, we're here today. We'll be doing another town hall in the spring. But we also have a series of other activities happening. There are 5 smaller dinners at the President's home around key topics that are important to our strategy moving forward. We've held a couple of those already. We'll continue to hold these as we move into the next semester. We also have, and this is new, 5 what we're calling Future Maker Forums. And they're focused around the initiatives that you see listed on the screen, and they're open to the entire campus. You know, it's going to be a time for you to come to engage with that initiative lead about where is that initiative, where are we going, and to give your input about where we need to be going and ideas that you might have. In addition to that, Nathan and I are going out and meeting with the faculty and staff of each of the colleges, as well as lots of different units around campus. And then we do plan to have Data Day, once again, Data Day 2.0. It's scheduled now for May 8th, as you know. Literacy and data literacy is one of our key components that we're looking at. Now, there are many more meetings beyond these meetings. Whoops, how do I get that out of there? There you go. So if you go to our website, you'll see lots of other meetings as well. There are lots of ways, if you're interested in becoming engaged with the strategic plan. This just gives you a sense of what some of those are as we're moving forward. We also put together, with the help of the senior leadership team and our initiative leads, 50 action items that we've put in place to accomplish this year across the 10 different initiatives. Nathan and I meet regularly with the initiative leads to make sure we're making progress against those, and we'll be putting that out so you have a chance to see what that looks like as well. These are the top level action items as we look at next year. Do you want to take those?
I mentioned catastrophe modeling is the first university research center. We're looking to stand up 2 additional university research centers this year. We've talked in forums like this and in other settings about the idea of creating an opportunity for students to come to Lehigh without initially declaring a college, where we've called that an exploratory first semester. In some contexts, we've thought about it as an exploratory first year. We're working closely with Faculty Senate in order to try and develop that curriculum, develop a plan for how it is that would work in such a way that students can explore in a structured way opportunities in various colleges and still be on track to graduate in 4 years. We have gone beyond the community, the survey of the community. We're looking to develop a report about the impact that we have on the community, both economic impact and other impact. This year we are looking to expand the online and in-person graduate programs and grow existing graduate programs. Expansion of graduate education is something that is a key element of the plan. It is something that we need to make some important investments in this year in order to begin to get those numbers to begin to move. You'll hear more about this today, but we've talked about, and as part of the plan, we've identified that there's an opportunity for us to do something different and innovative within graduate education, especially within doctoral education, to do a better job of preparing doctoral students for the variety of career tracks that may be of interest to them. And as I mentioned before, we have a very specific goal, a very quantitative goal of getting the first-year retention rate of the class that arrived this fall to be 95% when we have the census on the 10th day of class next year.
I'm not exactly sure what happened there.
Well, looks like you're good.
Okay. Just a couple of other updates for you. As you hopefully know, as we have in the past, we create future maker grants to incentivize, encourage folks that are part of this community to step up and make a difference in one of our initiative areas. We have 2 of those Future Maker grants that are out there right now. The first is all about mountaintop activation. You'll hear a lot about Mountaintop in a minute. These grants are for $10,000 and are both to support specific activities happening up here or short-term installations that we have on the Mountaintop Campus that will create energy and excitement. And then we have the graduate program development grants, which have a deadline later, I believe the end of January, where it'll be grants for release time for faculty who are developing new graduate programs for us moving forward. That release time would be next fall or the following spring as we look at moving forward. And then last, just back to the whole idea of no bystanders, one of the elements of our plan is the org of the future, which is a way of saying we want to be as streamlined, as efficient, as responsive an institution as we possibly can be. And nobody knows what it feels like to be part of this institution more than all of you. So if you have a good idea or you have a problem, a roadblock that you continue to run into in your own position, and you want to suggest that we look at how we can do that better, take a picture of this QR code and send your suggestion to the Org of the Future group that then culls through these and brings these forward for very real action in a whole host of different ways. So, questions before we move on to the 2 initiative discussions? It was that straightforward? All right. Well, you'll get a chance to ask questions again at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Nancy Trainer come forward. Nancy, as you will recall from my initial comments, is our Associate Vice President for Facilities and Campus Planning, and she will talk to you about all things Mountaintop. Nancy.
Or at least many things Mountaintop. As you have heard, fully activating the Mountaintop is a key initiative of the Lehigh strategy. I'm going to give a brief overview of what that means, the context for the initiative, and then look forward to what might happen in the future. So first, why is it important that we transform the Mountaintop, beyond the fact that it's here? Activating Mountaintop, as you can tell by it's being added to the infrastructure category of the initiatives, is not a means in itself. Rather, it's a means of facilitating other goals and initiatives of Lehigh's strategy, things that are fundamental to the institution. To double research, for example, over the next 10 years, or to attract external partnerships, to build those relationships is going to take more space than we have, and different kinds of space than we have on the Asa-Packer campus. So Mountaintop is key. And also, let's not forget that there's also a thriving academic community that's already here on Mountaintop. This is a place of tremendous if somewhat unrealized opportunity. A vision statement, a sort of a working statement for what this might be in the future, is a 24/7 mixed-use community that focuses on research, research translation, relationships with companies, corporate partnerships, and community building. That this can be a real differentiator for Lehigh University and, by extension, for the Lehigh Valley. This vision is very similar in many ways to what was laid out about 10 years ago by the Brookings Institution and called an innovation district. And Brookings' thesis was very simple. It was that mixed-use, community-focused neighborhoods work better, attract more research, attract more partnerships than single-use research parks. So just a tiny bit of history. A single-use research neighborhood is exactly how Mountaintop was conceived by Bethlehem Steel when it was built around 1961. The Helble Research Laboratories was at one time the world's largest steel testing facility. Its design, what we now call mid-century modernism, and its ambition landed at a spot in the National Architectural Press. This was a big deal at the time. But its heyday didn't last too long. And I've been told, but haven't quite verified, that there was only one patent that came out of this entire enterprise. By the end of 1986, Bethlehem Steel had sold 742 acres and 5 buildings on Mountaintop to Lehigh. Looking at Lehigh's use of Mountaintop against a timeline shows some things that are interesting, at least to me. Something about its long-term occupants, like Atlas and the College of Education, who've been here almost from the start. And also how, after buildings B and C were purchased just a little over 10 years ago, how the use of Mountaintop by the university was accelerated. And it's important to note that the departments that are on Mountaintop are thriving. Over the past 5 years, for example, biological sciences has doubled its research funding. A quick walk through their hallways shows that the department is buzzing. There are people, students, faculty in the hallways. When you look into the labs, there are people in activity. It's one of the more active labs, frankly, that I've seen on campus. The increase in majors in art, architecture, and design over in Building C, and the increase in computer science majors make them 2 of the fastest growing departments in the university. And Atlas, which we remember was one of the first Lehigh groups to be based at Mountaintop in the late 1980s, continues to demonstrate that the right combination of programs, expertise, and facility can generate external partnerships and address real-world problems. Sounds a lot like the Lehigh strategy. So the question that we have is, how do we build on and accelerate this progress? So for my money, no other institution of Lehigh's size and profile has Mountaintop's unique combination of assets, starting with its location in the Lehigh Valley. 50 million people live within 200 miles of the Lehigh Valley, and the region outpaces the rest of the state in both population growth and job growth. I did not know that when I moved here, and I certainly did not know that before I started looking for apartments, because the flip side of this growth is that low apartment vacancy and a very competitive rental market, which is particularly difficult for our graduate students and points to a need for graduate student housing if we're intending to grow our graduate population. So now this is my favorite part. Now let's think about some of the physical attributes. First of all, and most obvious, is that we have a spectacular and authentic sense of place here. I don't see any downsides to this. Scale. You come up here, the scale of Mountaintop, it not only sort of makes you think, makes you dream a little bit, but it also enables activities that simply aren't that possible or that feasible on Asa Packer, including simple things like throwing a Frisbee. But the flip side of this is that it often feels empty and it's fast. And the simple walk from Building C to Iacocca can feel like a long way when there's nobody in between. You could take these maps of Bryant Park and Mountaintop Campus are to the same scale. So you can take everybody who works or studies on Mountaintop on a regular basis, put them in that middle space, and it still wouldn't feel as vibrant as a walk through Bryant Park on a sunny day. We just need more people. Another physical attribute. Another physical attribute. We have abundant natural resources. The wooded slopes that surround us help provide habitat and contribute to the health of the Delaware River watershed, but are also used by various departments for research, and there's recreational opportunities here as well. Thinking about these resources as positive assets rather than just the filler or the barriers between campus precincts can go a long way toward a more coherent, connected campus and toward really thinking about Mountaintop in a new way. In addition to these large-scale landscapes and woods, we also have a legacy of robust, high-ceiling, long-span interior spaces, including some, like Atlas, that are really well-used, the bays in Building C, and less well-used, Building B. These are notoriously expensive to build. They're real resources for us, but our challenge is to figure out how best to put these to use for us in the service of our mission and goals. And while we're talking about physical attributes, I also want to mention our wonderful collection of large-scale outdoor sculptures. These should be better connected to each other and to where people are. It's really easy and kind of wonderful to imagine an arts walk through the landscape here, or lighting more of the work so it becomes a more integral part of the Mountaintop identity. Beyond the physical attributes, Lehigh also has multiple pathways for different kinds of partnerships here. Here on Mountaintop, students from Lehigh and 10 other institutions come here to Jordan Hall to be part of the ROTC program. Entrepreneurs and developing companies use space in Ben Franklin Tech Ventures or come to Mountaintop for Ben Franklin's programs. And the university's new Research Translation Acceleration Program, funded by a grant from the NSF, is intended to help nurture partnerships and turn scientific discoveries into marketable solutions to real-world problems. And John, I hope I got that mostly right. Last on this list of assets, but central to any plans for Mountaintop or for Lehigh, are Lehigh's growing research strengths in multiple related areas. A goal of the overall plan and the goal of Mountaintop is to support research with not just more space, but the right kinds of space and intentional, productive adjacencies. So here the question is, how do we make the most of these assets to advance our mission, our strategy? We're going to need to plan and work not only at multiple physical scales, but also at multiple time scales, acting in the present and making sure we are laying a good groundwork for the future. Mountaintop is a key component of the ongoing comprehensive plan for the university's campus that was mentioned a little while ago. A planning team led by architecture and planning firm Beyer Blinder Bell, also known as BBB, I don't find that either one rolls off my tongue, was engaged last winter to think about our campus as a whole, its buildings, its landscapes, circulation, infrastructure, and I'm sure I'm missing a thing or two there. They're about halfway through that effort. Some of you, many of you, I hope and trust, participated in last spring's engagement activities. These included things like a day-long open house at FM Library, group discussions focused at Mountaintop, which you see here, and a virtual survey sent to all students, faculty, and staff. A lot of ideas were generated by these workshops, including ideas for activities and programs. It was very apparent that better, more convenient connections between Lehigh's campus areas, including connections between mountaintop destinations, and especially between Mountaintop and Asa Packer, are key to our success here. Another campus-wide engagement with the planners will take place this winter, tentatively in February. I think President Helble alluded to that, with opportunities to weigh into the work on the work to date, and we hope that you'll do that. It's important and maybe a little humbling for those of us who are architects and planners by training and profession to realize that a good, flexible plan is only one of many kinds of plans and policies needed to transform Mountaintop. We've had plans before, and some aspects of these have been implemented. But planning also requires a lot of other kinds of decisions and investments. On the left in the blue are some of the uses and activities that have been identified by these engagement activities as opportunities to support the university's strategy. Things like space for external partners, more intentional clusters of research, graduate student housing comes up a lot, better conference space comes up a lot, biking, walking paths, more arts. In yellow, on the other side, are many of the kinds of things that need to happen as prerequisites or in tandem with these physical opportunities. Things like utility infrastructure, campus safety infrastructure and staffing, making sure we have good transit plans, thinking about zoning, all of these things. Some of them are tangible, some of them, like, how do we assess demand? If we build it, will they come? How do we know? Let's do our research. Let's see what data tells us. Assessing acceptable levels of risk and making sure that whatever we do now is sustainable, both in the physical sense, but also in the financial sense for the future. These things need to be considered in parallel with the campus plan, and we do hope that when the planners come to town again and have some broad engagement, that you'll take part of this. In the meantime, in tandem with these sort of larger, broader planning efforts, various groups of stakeholders have been meeting to talk about things we can do in the near term. For example, one of the goals of these conversations has been to create more intentional research proximities and partnerships here on Mountaintop. Potential moves are likely to include things like the Research Translation Acceleration Group that we talked about before, Office of Tech Transfer, and possibly catastrophe modeling, the new, the first new center created by Lehigh Strategy. So in addition to sort of bringing people together and sort of creating more sort of intentional working relationships, the idea of events, sort of one-off or recurring events. Some of these are academic or co-curricular in nature. You see some of them here. We didn't plan these as part of the initiative, but we helped daylight them. And so knowing what is going on here, making sure that people find out about it, helps build an identity for Mountaintop and Lehigh as a place where exciting things, drone competitions, hackathons, happen. Some of the activities being hosted and promoted are less explicitly tied to academics and are more about community building. Community building for those who are already here on Mountaintop and also for the broader university. The Project for Public Spaces, a cross-disciplinary nonprofit most known for transforming Bryant Park and some other spaces in New York City, teamed up with the Brookings Institution to develop placemaking principles for innovation districts. These principles are focused on bringing people together, building on what exists, and using trial and error to figure out what works best. If a regular food truck at lunchtime doesn't attract people, bring it here at night. If nobody uses the new ping pong tables in the Snyder Courtyard, we'll move them somewhere else. These are sort of low investment, easy to do things. They're sort of tactical. Let's see what works. Let's see what brings people to Mountaintop. Let's see what the people who are already at Mountaintop find make their lives here better and make them feel like part of a community. These activities help build community, but also help identify innovation districts as places of choice for researchers, for students, for companies. Here are 3 communities in Philadelphia that I know pretty well from firsthand experience and also through Instagram, whereas I am as likely to find out about some of the placemaking activities that are going on there. You'll see a lot of recurring themes, lots of yoga at dawn for some reason, lots of food trucks. The kinds of social activities they promote are as sort of forward-facing as the companies that call these places home, and you'll see some of those listed on the right. The events are opportunities in place and in community, but also in economic development. The idea is people want to be where they see people and feel part of a community. It's no secret that the presence of people attracts other people. Ruth Traldi, I just saw her here, is Mountaintop's new programs manager. She joined the Office of Strategic Planning and Initiatives in late August. Her job is to engage people at Mountaintop, facilitating programs that attract new people and supporting the people who already call Mountaintop their Lehigh home. Among other things, she's formed groups of students, she's convened groups of stakeholders and faculty and staff from across the university, and published a university-wide newsletter. We're really glad to have her in this role, and I hope that you'll all seek her out. And finally, to close the presentation, Ruth and I have a couple of requests. One of them is that we hope that you will consider hosting your events on Mountaintop, letting Ruth know and helping us daylight them, letting people know all the exciting things that are happening here already. And Mark mentioned this before. The other thing that we hope you will do is that you will consider applying for a Future Makers Mountaintop Activation Grant. These are for events, pop-ups, open to students, faculty, and staff. Read the brief. There are very few restrictions on what we're asking for. The only thing we're asking is that they are feasible and that they occur in the calendar year 2025. With that, I will take a brief question or two, or I will turn it back to Mark. Okay.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Great job. Any quick questions, or we'll hold them till the end? Okay, I think we'll hold them to the end. Sabrina, you're on.
So I've been asked to present on some work that a group of faculty and staff and I have been kind of diligently going through over the last 7 to 8 months. And so we were charged with really thinking critically about doctoral education. And I know that it was actually stated that this is about PhD redefinition. And I think it's really, really important for us to note it's doctoral education here at Lehigh, because we have more than just PhDs. This, in fact, was one of the first kind of existential things that the group needed to grapple with, because this group is composed of faculty and staff from across the campus. Many of the faculty know their part of doctoral education. They know what they do, they know what their program does, they might know a little bit about what their college does, but they don't know what happens outside of their unit. And so we've spent a lot of time simply trying to understand one another, to try and draft something that would be broadly applicable to the university at large around this idea of expanding doctoral education. And so this question has been posed to every group we've put this in front of. And it's been an interesting experiment. I put it in front of the Graduate Research Committee, and their response was, huh. And they kind of looked at it for a second. And then I saw a lot of heads shaking. No, they hadn't considered this. They really haven't thought about job placement for doctoral students that could happen outside of the academic sphere. And so we've also put this in front of students. Students' responses are obviously very different. They're like, yeah, we're trying to figure out how the heck we're supposed to make something out of this thing that we're doing in doctoral studies. And so interestingly, from surveys that we put out, roughly 63% of the doctoral students here on campus don't aspire to be a research professor at an institution like Lehigh. About 30% of them, frighteningly, have also never had a conversation with their advisor about their career plans. This is a failure on the part of people like myself. I have doctoral students. I do try to talk to them about their career plans. But as we think about what doctoral students are coming here to learn, it is not simply to produce research papers and follow in the footsteps of their mentor. It is to grow their research portfolio and their skill set so that they can explore and tackle anything that they might want to tackle that needs that level of training. So we did a lot of research. This is just some examples. I know all of this is way too small to read. But a couple of things that I'd like to point out. A couple of things that we've circled or highlighted. Collaborative skills, the ability to produce productive relationships across functions and geographies. Pretty sure I've never thought about that with my doctoral students, and neither have many of the other faculty that sat on this committee. Participate in yearly planning of strategic investments in laboratory instrumentation and new technologies. Most of us make financial decisions for our labs. We engage students where needed, but certainly not at that kind of strategic level, and so on and so forth. You could go out and look at any job description outside of higher education and find a lot of areas where we are not being intentional with doctoral training. We're definitely not helping the students be intentional around what they want to do. And again, I think this has been somewhat illustrated as faculty training students have been asked to reflect purely on the fact if they've ever looked at a job outside of our space. And so students are pretty savvy. They know that there's not a lot of jobs that are going to exist in higher ed in their space, that job pool is shrinking. And some other interesting facts that, again, some of my colleagues in the faculty were not aware of is that 20% of universities train 80% of the domestically trained faculty here in the US. So thinking a little bit about that, knowing that, yes, we have had students who've done doctorates here at Lehigh go on to amazing research careers across the globe and here domestically. It is a small fraction of those who end up in a path in higher education. And these types of statistics are certainly not stacking the deck up for them. Students are really aware of this. They're paying attention. They're bringing it up to us. And as they think about these hiring trends, they are increasingly identifying with jobs that sit outside of academia. Unfortunately, while students recognize that the jobs sit outside of academia, the fact that 30% of our students don't talk to their advisor about job placement leads to numbers like this. And so while our undergraduate placement numbers have been on a positive trajectory, our doctoral student numbers have not. And I think that this is a canary in a coal mine for Lehigh. Looking at the last year, looking at those placement numbers, and asking ourselves the very difficult question of how do we improve this? One of the questions that the group itself raised when I put this data in front of them was, well, they might just need a break, right? Doctoral students just need a break after finishing, and so this is probably a national trend. So I pulled UPenn's numbers, I pulled Stevens' numbers. I figured, yeah, they're right down the road, pretty close. We can relate with those institutions. UPenn was 88.5% in the same time frame. Stevens was 97%. Again, this is a Lehigh trend, not necessarily a Pennsylvania, New Jersey trend, and it's one that we need to pay attention to. And so with all of that in mind, kind of what this working group, members are kind of shown on the right, really took on was, how do we ensure that all doctoral students have the opportunities to expand their professional and transferable skills, really outside of academia if that's what they choose, but really to think about what this next generation of doctorate holders is going to look like, and how does Lehigh contribute to that? And so we did a lot of data collection. You probably got some surveys. I apologize if they were annoying. We have done a lot of focus groups, lots of faculty sitting in rooms really talking about things that were going wrong, lots of students disclosing information that I really would like to have not heard. We also looked at department and college policy documents as well as curriculum documents to try to understand why students have the sense that they can't be more explorative in their curriculum, in their training trajectory. And so what we largely found was there is a pretty considerable alignment of skill sets that are actually needed between all of the groups. All 5 of these colleges, this plethora of doctoral degrees that we offer here at the university, turns out they all come down to a pretty large group of skill sets, but a very common group of skill sets. Students and faculty are very, very focused on writing. But when we've gone out to alumni, specifically alumni with doctorates, they've said writing is important, but it's all levels of communication that are actually more critical in the role that I fill. We also have talked a lot about high impact opportunities, conference attendance being the top of the list for most people. This is a common theme. It runs across our campus. It does not matter which college, which program, which student, which faculty member. This was a theme. And there is a lot of concern about adding on. Pursuing a doctorate is already hard. It is already time-consuming. It is already exhausting in a lot of ways. And so anything that we add on, either to the students or to the faculty delivering these educational opportunities, if we don't have both value attached to that, as well as resources, it's not worth pursuing. And finally, remaining mindful of what that doctoral core currency is, which are products of a variety of types, academic papers, productions, other types of products that students can produce during a doctorate. We still have to remain mindful that they are the core currency for job placement in a lot of ways. They're also the core currency that help us drive research forward here at Lehigh. And so not detracting from that, but rather ensuring that that can be done more productively and more efficiently was on our mind. And so then we went back to the core competencies. These were established in 2012. Oddly enough, I don't think many people know about them. They actually sit in a PDF that you have to know where to find it on the web. Think about that for a second. So that is how much attention we have paid to what the core competencies that we as an institution developed back in 2012. We took a look at these, thought, you know what, they largely still apply. They could use a little bit of language tweaking, possibly, but in many ways, they are still applicable, and they are broadly applicable across the 5 colleges. But what we're not doing, number one, is assessing whether or not students are achieving these competencies. but we're also not enabling students to translate skills from these competencies into career paths. We also are not really leveraging opportunities for students to be very thoughtful about their career trajectory through individual development plans, career portfolios, et cetera. We have these tools. They're not necessarily being used as broadly as we would like. And so we then went out to peer groups. Turns out, not the first people to think about this, not the first people to worry about it. In fact, there's some really powerful examples out there. None of them are perfect. I've had a number of people reach out to me and say, well, this one's got real problems because. Got it. Understood. No system is going to be perfect in its first, second, or even final iteration. There are going to be things that have to evolve with time. But again, if we begin to look at institutions that we sometimes are attracting the same students from, Princeton being an example that I know we've lost doctoral students to, they are being somewhat more mindful of what the PhD progression and what the skill sets that students are gaining throughout could be. And so those peer examples, again, we've taken a lot of information. Some of them are built in-house. Some of them are paid. So Beyond the Professoriate is a paid service. This is something that institutions buy, put it on their website, and kind of expect students to find. This is actually probably one of the failures of those types of systems, in that they are not intentionally embedded into the doctoral trajectory. And so with all of that in mind, we have this is a very boring slide, my apologies. We have 5 suggestions, and so I'm going to walk you through kind of what each of these looks like at the very, very, very high level. And so recognize there is a body of work that sits behind this presentation that if you would like access to it, when I feel like all the spelling errors are corrected, I will give you access to it. Right now, it's in a pretty yucky state. The 5 elements. 1, develop a framework. We got to build something that lets students be intentional about the skills that they are gaining as a doctoral student. Otherwise, they are going to go to their labs or go to the library, and that is what they're going to focus on. And that's wonderful until the moment they have to go out and find a job. We need to help them transition in that way. Basically looking to establish a series of experiences that really help students develop those competencies and skills. There's a lot of work that's already happening across campus. The art grant, as one example, is heavily reflected within the framework that we are putting together. Putting together a Lehigh Doctoral Expo. We called it an expo because we didn't have a better word. We don't celebrate the work of doctoral students. It sits in a department, maybe. The last doctoral dissertation that I sat in on last week had 5 people in the room. 6 years of work. Really good work. Really interesting work. It's all about paint drying, in case you're curious, which is actually really fascinating. But single digits of individuals sitting in a room to see what this student has spent basically their 6 years of their life doing. We need to celebrate it more. For students to want to be part of us, we need to show that they matter, and celebrating it through some sort of an annual event where we bring in industry, faculty, collaborators, people across the Lehigh Valley to really showcase what a research institution is all about, could really enable our students to see the power of what they're doing and potentially be able to communicate it better to those employers when they go out looking for jobs. We've also got some expanded funding needs that we need to address, as well as a bit of alignment of graduate program leadership structures with the strategic plan. And so I'm going to go through just a couple of these things at a very high level. Definitions, competencies, skills, and wanted to define these because they oftentimes are interchangeable. People think of them in very similar ways. And then career pathways, really just a series of educational offerings that enable the development of skills, credential, and hopefully a little bit of career advancement in a particular field. So again, this is an excerpt. Please don't shout out at me that your program is not reflected. Trust me, it probably is, and if it's not, you'll have an opportunity to look at the big spreadsheet that we've got trying to capture all of the things that we already do. One of the competencies in that list of 5 was communication. I chose to focus on that here because it's something I think we can all really relate to. And where are we doing some of the things around communication? Again, excerpt, really small chunk of an enormous spreadsheet. Now, each of those competencies would have a series of skills, right? We've mapped out what that series of skills needs to be. The skill development would enable both student productivity, right, around writing papers, producing those dissertation products, but also enable with a path ahead, right? Help identify what that path could look like for them. Here's an excerpt from that, again, from a really, really big table. So skill, organize, communicate ideas effectively. Here are the careers that maps to. Again, this is not a fully comprehensive list. My suspicion is as soon as this gets put out into a web page, this is what we're imagining, building around it, I'm going to have faculty emailing me saying, well, what about this? Or what about this? Or what about this? And we'll have to figure out how to evolve this program, if you will, to map to the emerging needs. Career paths that we've currently been working around are here. If you identify big gaps in this, please, by all means, let me know so that we can build them in from the start. And those were in no preferential order. Academia just happened to be at the top. I really need to readjust those to not show a bias. Second, ensuring that students really understand these skill sets and the career paths, and making sure that they understand that early, really just to help motivate them, to help move them in the direction that they want to go. But it also demonstrates externally that we care. Right? Again, as I look at institutions that have these types of programs out there, they're part of their recruiting platform. They are part of their brand. They are part of what this institution is all about. And I think that's where we want to go as an institution. A few of the things that we're grappling with still is around things like mini internships, right? How can we get students access and interested in career paths that they may not have originally thought for themselves? How do we get them to be really intentional around networking? Because it is such an important skill. And how many of these are curricular, co-curricular, funded, not funded? These are kind of details that we are still kind of in the midst of debating. The annual doctoral expo, again, turns out, not the first people to think about this. Penn State, partner down the road, they do this. Can't we? This would be a great place for it. Right? Again, you look out across this beautiful landscape, if we pick the right time of year, having an expo that really focuses on the products of doctoral work gives students the opportunity to network with others and highlights the fact that we are the research institution in the Lehigh Valley, I think is a really important part of what we are hoping the university will get behind. We have socialized this with a whole lot of people. So, and during that socialization, we have landed on a few things that need some augmentation, need some changes, et cetera. We put it in front of the Graduate Research Committee. Again, the faculty on that committee looked at me a little funny when I asked if they'd ever considered jobs outside of academia. Graduate students, the primary concern from them is around funding and ensuring that funding gaps are being filled. We have a little bit in our proposal about that, specifically around 9 versus 12-month appointments, as well as gaps in funding that can emerge. This was another piece that many of the group had to kind of understand. College of Engineering, which is my home college, students are funded for 12 months. Like, that is just the norm in most of our programs. That is not the norm across our campus. Many students get 9 months of funding, which means that for 3 months out of the year, they may be doing something that is not related to their doctoral education. That's going to extend their time to degree. It is going to lead to less ability for that student to continue to pursue that degree, and eventually leaving potentially ABD, which is not something that most students would aspire to. We've also put this in front of the graduate associate deans. The deans have had a copy of the white paper, but we've not gotten a chance to discuss it. Department chairs have been commenting on a white paper, and this Friday I will be in front of them. And then this session, of course, campus community, next steps are directors of graduate study and then the faculty at large. So this is making the rounds over the last couple of months. And so the expanded funding piece would be shown here. So 9 versus 12. When we think about what that would cost at double our current PhD student headcount, it's roughly $2 to $3 million. Okay. This would help with persistence. It would help with time to degree, et cetera. Again, we're not the first people to think about this. 2 institutions have made big announcements recently about 12 months of funding, Michigan as well as Duke. In addition, high impact opportunities. High impact opportunities being conference attendance in a lot of ways. If any of you have ever talked to a graduate student, you know that they have to apply for funding in many cases. Applying for funding may mean they get $100. Cost of registration for a scientific conference, about $1,500. You add to that travel, meals, incidentals. All of a sudden, you've reached a point where students are paying for these things, sometimes out of pocket. And so these really high impact opportunities are things that we should enable, right, as a campus for students to be able to participate in. Currently, the gap, again, if we think about all doctoral students, roughly current headcount, and a $1,500 budget, it would be about $350,000 for the university to kind of cover that gap for these students. And then the final piece that has actually received the most commentary is around how do we lead our graduate programs? Every program is structured a little bit differently. Program directors receive differential compensation, differential recognition. In fact, it may count for some and it may not count for others. It's actually a really murky system out there. And what that means is some graduate program directors are very dedicated to the role, and others may not be as dedicated as we want them to be. But we do need to recognize they're critical to the success of all of this. And if we are looking to have students identify career paths, go through training opportunities, and be intentional about their choices, graduate program directors are going to help lead that charge, because they're going to work with the faculty who are paying for the student to help showcase what this skill can lead to in the laboratory environment, can lead to in terms of student productivity. And they speak the language of their fellow faculty. And ultimately, while this plan is all about the students that it will serve, it will not be successful without the faculty buy-in. And program directors are at the front of that. And so this is a feedback session. Please, anything that you've got, any questions that you might have, I'm happy to address them. This is a work in progress. Help us make it better. Thanks.
So thank you, Sabrina. You've given us a lot to think about. So you've seen 2 significant presentations, one about doctoral reform, the other one about Mountaintop. We've talked about the overall plan, where we are. This is your chance to ask any questions you may have. So, any questions from the audience? Yeah, we can hang around and answer. There was one question that was asked of me by somebody that couldn't be here, so I'm going to ask that one question, and it had to do with our commitment to coordinated deployment of activity and resources on our campus into the community around us. So do you want to spend just a couple minutes telling us what that looks like, Stacy, in terms, because you're leading the engagement with the community initiative. Do we have Tracy? Yeah.
No, happy to do so. And it happens to the very best of us.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tracy King. I am your Associate Vice President of External Affairs within University Communications and Public Affairs. So this question from Mark Olette was around, are we coordinating efforts from across campus to address the needs of our community? This particular question was around workforce readiness. And so where I want to start as far as a recap of the committee was in year one, we spent a lot of time trying to surface all of the things, the amazing things that are happening across campus, whether it's research, experiential learning, service, that is adding, giving value, and contributing to the vitality of our local community, whether it's Bethlehem or the Lehigh Valley at large, or frankly, globally. And there's a ton of it. But within this question, we actually surfaced a program that I wasn't even aware of. Because last year we identified over 150, and we knew that it was just the tip of the iceberg. And so this is a good example of how we need to continue to listen. And Mark, I'll be reaching out to learn more. But the short answer to your question, are we going to mobilize all of the resources from across campus? Yes, that is one of our goals. We are still identifying many of the collaborators who have common purpose or passion. And one of our nearer term goals is to start to get those groups into the room so that they can talk to one another, we can fully leverage our resources and amplify our impact. But Mark, one of the things that I want to make sure that we all know is that Lehigh University is one of the primary funders of the Lehigh Valley Hispanic Center. And they have a specific program for the linguistic and cultural workforce engagement. So, Mark, if you don't know that, we can connect you with the Lehigh Valley Hispanic Center as well so that you can start to learn about what they're doing in that space particularly. So that's the answer to the question. But I'm going to say, as we continue to work this year to deliver the impact report, to help tell our stories of all the different ways that the university is working with the community near and far to create vitality either from an economic perspective or a community perspective. We're going to deliver that report so we can help tell that story, but then we're also looking to identify the opportunities for placemaking, like on Mountaintop, for opportunities for experiential learning. Sabrina, I'd love to talk to you more about how we get graduates out there, working with some of our community partners, so that we can continue to articulate and demonstrate the value that this organization brings to this community near and far. So before I start to ramble, I'm gonna say more to come on how we will pull resources together, but yes, it is absolutely an objective of the initiative. Great. Thank you, Mark.
Great, thank you very much, Tracy. Any other questions? All right. Well, if not, we will stick around for a few minutes at the end. If you have any follow-up questions for any of today's presenters, for the president, for me, for Nathan, just one last time, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here this afternoon. And even more importantly, I want to thank you for being engaged with our strategy moving forward. Please, please stay engaged. We appreciate that. Have a great afternoon.